All around Africa, debt is rising. Today in Kenya, public debt represents about 70% of the country's GDP, the highest in 20 years. The big question is, how will President Ruto's administration find the money to pay off this debt without further angering millions of Kenyans? These topics were also relevant more than 40 years ago at the very first steps of independence for most African countries. The subject of Africa's debt has been around for decades. In July 1987, Thomas Sankara, former leader of Burkina Faso, tried to convince his fellow African leaders not to pay their debts in an effort to force better negotiations with the European companies responsible for most of African nations' debt. In this passionate speech, Sankara wanted to create a united front against debt. In this speech, Thomas Sankara warned that he would not live to attend another meeting if Burkina Faso were alone in resisting its debt obligations. He was right. A few months later, he was murdered in a coup backed by France. This is one of the last speeches given by Thomas Sankara. I wanted to translate it into English to expand on this very relevant topic. Let me know what you think about what was said in the speech in the comments. If you want more of these types of videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Here is Thomas Sankara translated into English.
We believe that debt should first be analyzed in terms of its origins. The origins of the debt date back to the origins of colonialism. Those who lent us money are the same ones who colonized us. They are the same ones who managed our states and our economies. It is the colonizers who indebted Africa to the funders, their brothers and cousins. We were completely strangers to this debt, so we cannot pay it at all. Debt is indeed still neo-colonialism, where the colonizers have transformed into technical assistance. In fact, we should say that they have transformed into technical assassins. And it is they who have offered us sources of funding, internal donors, that we use every day as if there were men whose yawning was enough to create development in others. These funders have been advised and recommended to us. We were presented with enticing financial arrangements. Files. We are in debt for 50 years, 60 years, even more. That is, we have been led to compromise our peoples for 50 years and more. But debt, in its current form, is controlled and dominated by imperialism, a carefully organized reconquest, so that Africa, its growth, and its development adhere to levels and standards that are completely foreign to us, by ensuring that each of us becomes a financial slave. That is to say, a slave in every sense. To those who had the opportunity, the cunning, the deceit to place funds with us, with the obligation to repay. We are told to repay the debt. It is not a moral question. It is not a question of this supposed honor of repaying or not repaying. Mr. President, we listened to and applauded the Prime Minister of Norway when she spoke right here. She said, she who is European, that not all the debt can be repaid. The debt cannot be repaid. The debt cannot be repaid because, first of all, if we do not pay, our funders will not die. Let's be sure of that. On the other hand, if we pay, it is us who will die. Let us be sure of this as well. Those who brought us here, those who led us into debt, played like in a casino. As long as they were winning, there was no debate. Now that they have lost the game, they demand repayment from us.
Crisis. No, Mr. President. They played, they lost. That's the rule of the game. Life is an endless journey, constantly moving forward, evolving and adapting with each passing moment, never ceasing to progress. We cannot repay the debt because we do not have the means to pay. We cannot repay the debt, as we are not at fault for the debt. We cannot pay the debt because, on the contrary, others owe us what the greatest wealth can never repay. That is to say, the debt of blood. It is our blood that has been shed. We are talking about the Marshall Plan that rebuilt the economic Europe. But we never talk about the African plan that allowed Europe to face the Hitlerian hordes. When their economy was threatened, their stability was threatened. Who saved Europe? Africa did, rarely discussed. We talk about it so little that we cannot be complicit in this ungrateful silence. If others cannot sing our praises, we at least have the duty to say that our fathers were courageous and that our veterans saved Europe and ultimately allowed the world to rid itself of Nazism. Debt is also the consequence of conflicts. And when we are told today about the economic crisis, we are forgotten to be told that the crisis did not come suddenly. The crisis exists at all times, and it will worsen as the masses become increasingly aware of their rights in the face of the exploiters. There is a crisis as people resist wealth being held by few. There is a crisis because a few individuals deposit colossal sums in banks abroad that would be enough to develop Africa. There is a crisis as, in the face of these wealth, the masses refuse to live in ghettos in the lower areas. There is a crisis because people everywhere refuse to be in Soweto, facing Johannesburg. There is therefore a struggle, and the exacerbation of this struggle causes those in financial power to worry. We are being asked today to be complicit in the search for a balance. Balance, financial power holders, balance at the expense of our masks. We can't be complicit. No, we cannot support those who suck the blood of our people and live off the sweat of our people. We cannot accompany them in their murderous approach. Mr. President, we hear talk of a club, Paris Club, club of everywhere. We hear about the group of 5, the group of 7, the group of 10, maybe the group of 100. And what do I know yet? It is normal for us to create our club and our group. Let us ensure that starting today, Addis Ababa also becomes the seat, the center from which a new breath will emerge. The Addis Ababa Club, we have the duty today to create the united front of Addis Ababa against debt. It is only in this way that we can tell others by refusing to pay the debt. We do not come with a belligerent approach. On the contrary, we come with a fraternal approach. To put it plainly, the popular masses in Europe are not opposed to the popular masses in Africa. But those who want to exploit Africa are the same ones who exploit Europe. We have a common enemy. So, our club, starting from Addis Ababa, must also tell each other that the debt should not be paid. And when we say that the debt should not be paid, it is not because we are against morality, dignity, or respect for one's word. It is because we believe that we do not share the same morality as others. Between the rich and the poor, there is not the same morality. The Bible and the Quran cannot serve in the same way for the one who exploits the people and the one who is exploited. There should then be 2 editions of the Bible and 2 editions of the Quran. We can accept being told about dignity. We cannot accept being told about the merit of those who pay and the loss of trust regarding those who would not pay. On the contrary, we must say that it is normal. Today, on the contrary, we must recognize that the greatest thieves are the richest. A poor person, when they steal, does so not as a crime or a petty theft, but just to survive out of necessity. The rich are the ones who steal from the treasury, the customs, and who exploit the people. Mr. President, my proposal is not simply aimed at provoking or creating a spectacle. I would like to express what each of us thinks and wishes. Who here does not wish for the debt to be simply erased? Those who do not wish for this can leave, take their plane, and go straight to the World Bank to pay. We all, deep down in our hearts, truly wish. My proposal is not either. I would not want the proposal from Burkina Faso to be seen as coming from young people lacking maturity and experience. I also would not want anyone to think that only revolutionaries speak this way. I would like us to acknowledge that it is simply objectivity and obligation, and I can cite examples of those refusing to pay the debt, revolutionaries and non-revolutionaries, young people and old. For example, Fidel Castro has already said not to pay. He is not my age, even though he is a revolutionary. But I could also mention Francois.
Who said that African countries cannot pay? Poor countries cannot. I could cite the Prime Minister. I do not know his age. And I would feel bad asking him, but he is an example. I would also like to quote President Felix Houphouët-Boigny. He is not my age. However, he has officially stated, publicly at least regarding his country, the Ivory Coast cannot pay. However, the Ivory Coast is ranked among the wealthiest countries in Africa, at least in Francophone Africa. That is why, in fact, it is normal for her to pay more in contributions here. But Mr. President, this is not a provocation. I would like you to wisely offer us solutions. I would like our conference to adopt the necessity of clearly stating that we cannot pay the debt. Not in a belligerent, warlike spirit. This is to prevent us from individually getting ourselves killed. If Burkina Faso alone refuses to pay the debt, I will not be there at the next conference. On the other hand, with the support of everyone, which I need, with the support of everyone, we will be able to avoid paying, and by avoiding payment, we will be able to focus on our development. And I would like to conclude by saying, every time an African country buys a weapon, it is against an African, it is not against a European, it is not against an Asian, it is against an African. Therefore, we must also address this. In the momentum of resolving the debt issue, we need to find a solution to the problem of armament. I am a military person and I carry a weapon. But Mr. President, I would like us to disarm because I carry the only weapon I possess. And others have concealed the weapons they have. So, dear brothers, with everyone's support, we will be able to fish. We can also use these immense potentials to develop Africa because our land and our subsoil are rich. We have enough manpower and we have a huge, vast market. From north to south, from east to west, we have enough intellectual capacity to create or at least adopt technology and science wherever we can find them. Mr. President, let us ensure that we establish this united front in Addis Ababa against the debt. Let us ensure that it is from Addis Ababa that we decide to limit the arms race among weak and poor countries. The clubs and machetes that we buy are useless. Let us also ensure that the African market is the market of Africans. produce in Africa, transform in Africa, and consume in Africa. Let us produce what we need and consume what we produce. Instead of importing, Burkina Faso has come here to showcase the cotton fabric produced in Burkina Faso, woven in Burkina Faso, and sewn in Burkina Faso to dress the Burkinabe. My delegation and I are dressed by our weavers, our farmers. Not a single thread comes from Europe or America. I am not putting on a fashion show, but I would simply like to say that we must accept to live. It is the only way to live freely and with dignity. I thank Mr. President. The homeland or death will come to us. It is the only way to live freely and with dignity.